Hi everyone, welcome to Translation Thursdays. We will wait for the next 2-3 minutes for people to join in and for Jerry to arrive, and then we'll begin at 7 p.m. sharp. Thank you so much for joining us, those of you who are joining us on Zoom, and those of you who are watching on Facebook Live as well. Really glad to host this session today. I'm Mohini, and I run Mother Tongue Twisters. And we're hosting these weekly sessions for people who are interested in listening to translations, listening about translations. So again, really grateful that all of you are here to give us 2 or 3 minutes before we begin. I see that Jerry has joined the call. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, sorry, am I late?
No, not at all. We're just waiting for people to join, so we'll start in the next 2-3 minutes. You can settle in and sort of...
How many people here already?
There are about 30 people here now.
Oh, wow, that's good.
Also live on Facebook. So maybe some people watching us on Facebook as well. But the idea is to really do this as a Zoom meeting so that people can also engage with you once your talk is over. So I hope people will come in, switch on the videos and mute themselves and ask questions. But in the meantime, do mute yourselves while Jerry's talking so that there's no overlap in the sound. So yeah, we'll just give it another 2 minutes. At 7 o'clock, I'll start introducing you and then we'll begin the session.
Great. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, it's good.
Okay. Lovely. The whatever frame thing is okay?
Yeah, I think that works. And welcome to Zoom. Is it your first?
Yeah, this is my first Zoom thing. So everyone who's here, please be gentle. I've never done this before. I suddenly realized what they're saying about classical musicians say about the live audience. I always thought that was like, come on, you're singing, they're listening, and it doesn't matter. But right now I'm thinking, I can't see anybody. I don't know how they're responding. I don't know whether they're getting it. I'm going to be a little lost, but anyway, let's see. It's a new experience. I mean, this is the brave new world with the new virus. That is rewriting actually how we are doing stuff.
There's a bit of an echo, Jerry. I'm not sure how we can fix that, but otherwise it's fine. Your voice is clear enough. But there's a slight echo.
I don't know.
I think it's... If anyone is having issues with sound, just write on chat so we can sort of know, unless everyone's okay, in which case we'll continue.
Okay, great.
Free to use the chat box for any questions that you have in the meantime. Once we finish the talk, then I'll invite you to ask your question on video. So hopefully we'll do that sometime.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ruchi. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping it's not the fan because I don't want to put off the fan because I'll then check to death.
Let's have headphones or earphones or something. I don't know if that's... But let's not get into that now. I think we can just begin like that. It's fine. So there are about 43 participants on the call now. Maybe I can start my introduction then.
Yeah.
And we can begin. Okay. So welcome everyone to the 4th session of Translation Thursdays. It's been very overwhelming to receive the response to this session, but I guess it's no surprise that Jerry would attract such a large audience given his extended fan base all over. So again, a big warm welcome to all of you who are here. My name is Mohini and I'm hosting these sessions as a part of my online poetry initiative called Mother Tongue Twisters, where I'm collecting and curating Indian language poetry for young readers. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more updates on such sessions. These are weekly translation meetups where we're hoping to invite translators to speak on a different aspect of translation every week. So Jerry today is going to talk about who is the perfect translator. He has sort of been bold enough to agree to tackle that question. So we're excited to hear what he has to say. There are some of you on Zoom. There are some of you watching on Facebook Live. So again, thank you for watching. I'm going to move on to introducing our speaker for the day, and then I'll hand it over to you, Jerry. So please join me in welcoming Jerry Pinto. Jerry is the author of the widely read novels Murder in Mahim and the multiple award-winning M in the Big Home. I'm sure most of us here have read and enjoyed his books. Some of his most well-known translations from Marathi include Sachin Tendulkar's Cobalt Blue, Daya Pawar's classic autobiography Baluta, and the memoirs I Want to Destroy Myself or Mala Udvasta Vaitse by Malika Amar Sheikh, and I the Salt Doll or Mi Mithachi Bahuli by Vandana Mishra. Jerry also teaches journalism at the Sophia Institute of Social Communications Media in Mumbai and is on the board of directors of Mail Joel, which works on the space of child rights. In 2016, he was awarded the prestigious Wyndham Campbell Prize and the Sahitya Academy Award. Jerry, I really like what you said about translation in one of your interviews, where you say that it's much less lonely than writing because there's another voice in the room. And also that it helps you learn so much about your first language because you have to think about how you're going to use English to mirror thoughts that are expressed in another language, which is both challenging and interesting. So thank you for that. And thank you for all that you do for the cause of translation. I know that as soon as I reached out to you, you agreed and you said, anything for translation. So I really appreciate that. And again, really proud to have you here. Welcome. And, I'll now hand it over to you as you tackle the question, who is the perfect translator? Looking forward.
Okay, so I thought what I'd do is I'd tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a country called Monolingua. Monolingua was a fine country. It was really nice. It was peaceful. It was pleasant. Its people were happy. They all spoke one language and they got along quite well, but they thought something was missing. The world wasn't as exciting as they thought it could be, or it wasn't as rich and varied as they wanted it to be. So they went to the oracle, and the oracle was a woman who lived up on a hill. And they asked the oracle, "Gee, what do you think is wrong with our world? Something seems missing." So she said, "Actually, what you need is another language. You need some salt from another language, because this salt is what will make things taste good." So they said, "Okay, wonderful. We should get the salt. How do we get the salt?" So she said, "Lapping the shores of Monolingua is the river of meaning. And on the other side of the banks of that river is Altalingua, which has the salt that you need. Someone has to go across the river of meaning and fetch that salt back for you." So a general announcement was put out, and someone said, "I will go." This young woman said, "I will go and fetch the salt from Altalingua." And so she set out to cross the river of meaning. And she got to the other side, and the people of Altalingua were delighted to see her. And they said, "What took you so long? We've been meaning to send this salt to you, but the only way we can get this salt across is you must build a boat out of the salt. And you must put it into the river of meaning, and you have to take it across to Monolingua. That's the only way you can do it." So the poor translator said, "But the river of meaning is very, very rapid, and the salt will dissolve in the river." And they said, "Yes, we know. But that is what you've got to do. You've got to make a boat that is made out of our salt, and you've got to take it back across." So the translator thought about this for a while and then said, "Well, if it's the only way I can do it, then that's what I'm going to do." And she built a boat, and she got into the boat, and she pushed it off into the river, and the river of meaning began to grab at the salt, eagerly dissolving it. She got to a whirlpool in the center, which was the whirlpool of idiom. And there, more of the salt began to dissolve. And then she got to the kind of like rocky patch in the river, which was almost going to ruin her boat, which was the idea of multiple meaning. And then finally, She got to the other side, and when she got to the other side, all that was left was a handful of salt. She just had a handful of salt left. And she went to the people and she said, this is what I got. And they said, this much? You only got this much? And she said, well, I'm going again and I'll bring more salt the next time. That is what translators do. We bring very little salt back from our alter lingua. So before anybody asks about the losses in translation, before you quote the name of that film, Lost in Translation, to me, as though you're saying it for the first time, remember this: no one knows better than the translator how much is being lost in translation. We know, we feel it acutely. But our boat is dissolving around us even as we paddle frantically to get to the other side. And therefore, forgive, understand, enjoy the salt. And remember, okay, this is, I've done a little poem which I'm going to read out to you with your permission, Mohini. It's called For All Those Who Say Lost in Translation. A is for Akhmatova and Azmi, as in Kaifi Azmi, and Andal and Allende. B is for Basho and Bahinabai and Basavanna and Baudelaire, Balzac for Bama, and for Buddha called Gautama. He didn't speak English, you know. C is for Kawafi and Chutta and Tsokhamela. D is for Derrida and Dumil, also Duras, Marguerite Duras, and Dostoevsky. E is for Eluard and Elitis and Euripides. F is for Ferrante and Fez. G is for Goschini and Uderzo. You do remember that Asterix and Obelix spoke originally in Italian. They did not speak in English as you think, because you read them in English. G is for Ghalib and Gutha, for Genet and Gandhiji, who wrote in Gujarati. H is for Hafiz and Kholab and Hikmet and Hugo, Victor Hugo. I is for Ikuyu and Iqbal and Ibsen. J is for Janabai and Jesus, from Aramaic to Greek to Latin to English to me. K is for Kanhopatra and Kabir and Kautilya, for Kafka, Kundera and Kis. L is for Lipo, Laldeid and Lalik. M is for Montale, Mir, Mirabai, Manu, Manto, Muktabai and Musil. N is for Nirala and Nietzsche and Neruda and Namdev. O is for Onoi and Usiko and Ovid. P is for Pawar, Dayaji Pawar, and Pawar, Urmila Pawar, for Pavese and Proust. Q is for Cabani and Quasimodo, Salvatore Quasimodo. R is for Rahim and Rumi and Rilke and Rimbaud. S is for Sappho and Sadi, Saramago and Saishonagon and Shelke. T is for Tukaram and Tulsidas. And I could just stop there with these two. But it's also for T is for Tagore and Tolstoy. U is for Ungaretti and for Ugraji. V is for Vedvyas. I rest my case. But Valmiki speaks. And so I go on, because Virgil chants. Voltaire, Verlaine, Verne, and Varmas like Nirmal and Mahadevi. W is for Wali and Wangwai and Walser. X is for Shili and Shirsi. Y for Yevtushenko. Z for Zok and Zafar, and a Zachariah called Paul. The next time you say, so much lost in translation, think of what you gained in translation. Think of the way you wandered the world in translation. Think of the way all these people came to you in translation. Remember the gains of translation. They far, far outweigh the loss. That's all, practically all I wanted to say. But in the poem that I read out, I want you to remember the table that I told, I want you to remember one thing: the translator volunteer. Translators volunteer for a negotiation with language. We are negotiating with several things. At the beginning, we are negotiating on the very simple level of word. What is the word that you encounter in the original? How do you encounter it? What is your love of it? What is the tone of it? What is the sound of it? What is the beauty of it? What is the meaning of it? And now you begin to take this very delicate thing called a word and you're transferring it across language. But you're not transferring it across language, you're also transferring it across culture, you're transferring it across connotation, you're transferring it across the sound that it will lose and the sound that it will gain. The second negotiation that you're doing, therefore, is the negotiation with language. Third negotiation you're doing is the negotiation with the original writer. That original writer is now in the room saying, my line was funny. Have you made my line funny again? That writer may be dead, and therefore the onus on you is much more painful because he or she can't protect or defend themselves. That writer may be alive. And if that writer is alive, then they also have something to say if they know the target language well. If they don't know the target language a little, it's a little easier because then it's a matter of trust. My book, M and the Big Home, has been translated into French, Italian, Marathi, Hindi. In some cases, I'm able to listen, to help, to offer some suggestions, but in many cases, I'm not. I'm just a spectator. When M and the Big Home came out in Tamil, I didn't know what they called it. When it came out in Italian, it was called Il Grande They dropped M from the title without asking. These things happen. So when someone agrees to let you translate them, I know that they have a moment in which they are entrusting themselves to you. It's literally an entrusting of the self. Because when I know as a writer, I put the finest parts of myself into my writing. And therefore, when someone says, I want to translate M and the Big Home, they're translating the finest part of me. If they do a bad job, then that finest part of me gets eroded a little. And that's fine. I can't do anything about it. But all translation, therefore, is a negotiation with trust. And when you're reading a translation, therefore, you're reading with trust. You're saying, I trust that this person, encountering language, encountering a story, a poem, which is the most terrifying thing to do, encountering this text, has decided to take this text and work with it. And so therefore you won't have to say to yourself, I trust that he or she has done the best possible job. Often when you're reading a book, you think, or you're reading a translation, you think, why did they bother? And I suspect that often that is really the fault of the translation, not of the original, because the best only gets translated. There's an automatic filter. And this best, there are two peaks that stand out of the mountain of publication. One is the popular peak. So people will have heard about a popular writer, a popular book. It might well be a passing phase, a book like which tells you how the universe is listening to you, and therefore all you have to do is whisper into its ear, and therefore it will talk to you. That book might be translated into 100 different languages. And on the other side, it will be the peak of literature, which is poetry, good poetry, good novels, good short stories. These are the two peaks that get translated. The large majority doesn't get translated. So when you encounter a bad translation, that's our fault. That's what we did. We did it wrong. Okay. And I admit that there are many bad translations. But I'm saying when you begin the process of reading a translation, you have got to sort of try and cut that poor person a slack. In some slack. In India especially, literary translation is really not very well paid. It's not very well paid mainly because it's not very well read. So I'm asking you, when this is over, go out and buy a couple of translations. Buy them in your mother tongue, buy a language translation, buy them in English, and encounter these things. And finally, if you really get annoyed with a translation because you think it's not adequate, redo it. Take the original, sit down with it, and do even one page. Okay? This will give you a great empathy for the translator because you'll see exactly what you're up against. You'll see exactly what they are up against. And only by experiencing it will you know how difficult it is. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. I'm happy to take questions now. Mohini, would you like to say something? I
Yeah.
have, yeah, my video seems to be a pleasant young man in a pink shirt
Oh,
with
really?
headphones on. No, now you're back. Yeah, okay, there you are.
So thanks a lot, Jerry, for saying it like it is for all translators out there, and also leaving us with these noble thoughts. I know that you have said somewhere as well that all translations are ultimately failures, but they are the noblest failures.
Okay, so let me say this first of all. Okay, I think actually even writing is like when I write, I think in English largely because that's the intersection of biography, geography, and language, right? That's what determines the thoughts in our head and what language they are in. Um, Even when I'm writing in English and I'm trying to write in English, I'm translating because the thought is numinous. The thought is perfect inside my head. Its rhythms, its sounds, they're perfect and they're beautiful. And as soon as I put it down on paper, something gets lost. I think, yeah. But this character was much richer. This sound was deeper. This thought was warmer inside my head. It's lost in temperature now on the page. Why has it lost it on the page? And it's because inside your head, any number of your faculties are playing with language. I don't think only your brain plays with language. I think your ears, your for me, I'm a little synesthetic, so every new word that I encounter has a shape, actually a shape and a form. And whatever language it has a shape and a form that falls away from it. And what's left is just letters on a page. Now, my normal process of writing is um, to write on paper. When I type it, even the personality of my handwriting is eviscerated. It's pulled away, and what's left is the font. And the font is beautiful and sometimes very interesting because now you can see, especially when you're writing poetry, you can see line lengths another way. Okay. And so font is very exciting, but it's also eviscerated. So it gives you something and takes something away from you. And that's the process of writing. Give, take, give, take, give, take. Okay. So now writing, when you're putting it down on paper, when you're putting it down in the computer, it's failing because it's moving farther and farther away from that first intimate, nerve-born, gut-developed, fed by the body and the imagination. All that is is being lost, right? And what you've got is these sharply defined black words on a white screen. Now imagine translation. That's going to fail again. Okay, and but it is a failure that is built on the presumption of humanity's ability to to be to have empathy, to have understanding, to want to know what the other person is like or feels like or thinks like. Because okay, in India we all pride ourselves on being multilingual, right? We say I speak 4 languages. I walk out of the house and my neighbors are speaking Marathi, and I go downstairs and the vendor is speaking Hindi, and I arrive at my tuition pupil's house and ba there speaks only Gujarati, so I say kem che ba, majama, and I'm speaking Gujarati, and I come back and my grandmother calls and she only speaks Konkani, so I say Kohiago. And I'm so proud that I've used 5 languages in my life, but all these have been agenda based. They have been they have required me to speak them only so that I can get a certain thing done. I can get my vegetables from the vegetable vendor. I can be friendly to the grandmother of my tuition pupils. Blah, 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 blah. I'm not reaching in. I'm not building a walkway into someone's soul. I'm not asking them for their deepest thoughts and their deepest feelings, which they can only tell me in their literature. So when you translate literature, you're building this tenuous, thin walkway between two souls. You're building it between the poem of Majaz here and the poem reader of English here. who wants to know what Majaz is thinking. And so that now we built that bridge. Now walk that bridge. Read that poem. Hate it if you must. Say, "Arey, this has lost all the beauty of Urdu. Arey, this has lost all the beauty of and the magic of that language." But walk that bridge. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm going to take the liberty to ask you one or two questions before we move on to the questions that
Sure,
are.
sure.
So one is, do you feel that the landscape for translators and translation has changed in the country or around the world? Like, do you find that people are more open or willing to publish translations? I understand that there's a gap when it comes to buying translations, but do you find that there's a change in the perception towards translated work at all?
I think what actually happened, the best thing that happened is when the Man Booker started giving prizes to translated works, and then all the other prizes also started doing translated works and dividing the prize between the original author and the translator. Okay, this okay, this is such a terrible thing to say, but I think okay, translators have to live, yeah, and we have to eat, and no translator I know is starving. Okay, but translators also might like to travel abroad and might also like to buy a nice car and might also like to have a little cheese and wine from time to time and a nice big chunky prize with like half shared between you and the writer makes it possible for translator. I think that's the greatest thing that happened. Now, because that happened, because translations began to get prizes, publishers began to get interested because publishers can then say, "Hey, look, our book won the Man Booker, and okay, I mean, we didn't publish the original, but we published the translation. Yippee-hoo, we are so delighted." Okay, that's one thing that's happened, and I think that actually possibly is the biggest thing that happened because, okay, it's one thing to say translation is a moral imperative. I believe it is. Okay, in a country like this, I believe translation is a moral imperative. We've got to do it if we can do it, and we can do it well. Then there's no way you can avoid that responsibility, right? But and it's one thing to say, therefore, publishers have a moral imperative to do translations, all that manner. But publishers also want to have wine and cheese. They also want to travel abroad. So if the translations don't sell, then they'll do them like the way they do poetry. Chalo yaar, ek translation karte hain. Chalo, we'll do a translation, etc., etc. That kind of like. So here's the thing: if we want more walkways to other language souls, okay, please buy translations. Every time you go to a bookshop, buy what you want. Buy 50 Shades of Grey. Buy 50 Shades of Black. Buy the new bestseller. Buy a thriller. Buy a literary novel. Buy a book of poems, and then buy a translation also. Just add one translation. Din dahade, add one translation to the basket. Okay, I'm saying do this and surprise yourself. Surprise yourself because it's like $200, $300 for a translation. And if then once you've done that, you don't like it, give it away now. Give it as a book gift to a friend. There's always a use for a book. Okay, that's my commercial break. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Another question. Okay, so yes, publishers are slightly more open now. Like for instance, an agent will tell you, write a book, don't do a translation because we can get more money for a book. That's, yeah, okay, that's them. But it's the way it works. Yeah.
That's excellent advice. Thank you, Jerry. I'm going to ask you a question before I move on to the question. So last question before I move on. There are questions pouring in now. But, since we are talking about, and the platform that this is hosted on is Mother Tongue Twisters, where I'm trying to collect Indian language poetry for young readers in particular. And I know that you've also talked about your journey with Marathi and how you sort of reconnected with the language at a later stage or at a later age. And so I think my question is, do you think translation plays a role also in terms of encouraging young people to engage with their mother tongues in a way? And do you think that we're doing enough to ensure that there are young people who are reading good translations or going back to their mother tongue, and we're actually encouraging them to read in the original languages enough at a younger age?
I think we are, as far as language goes, in general, we're doing a really bad job everywhere, not just with the mother tongue or the home language, but with English as well. So you can have, okay, I have friends who have finished engineering degrees, and when it comes to writing a letter, they actually ring me up and say, "Can you draft a letter for me?" Yeah, and I think 15 years of learning English and you can't write a letter. Okay, that's one level of it. But you ask them to solve a quadratic equation, they'll be able to do it like that. Okay, so our entire focus for in most of our educational experience is not on the love of language. It is on actually mathematics and science. That's what we want our kids to know. And language is kind of like, okay, that is the kind of thing that you have to get through and finish, and you have to get your marks in it. And it doesn't matter if you can write a letter or you cannot express yourself, or you cannot think, or you cannot make a speech. And that all that is peripheral because it is artsy. Artsy. Okay, and artsy won't feed you. This is basically parents. So I think schools, for instance, when they teach language, they rarely have a language teacher who 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 is excited, who bounces into the room saying, "Just listen to this lovely poem I heard this morning," and just reads a poem and makes everyone chant it or sing it or whatever. We don't. I remember a lot of the poetry that I studied in school simply because we sang the poems. Why don't we sing poems to children? Uh, why why don't we do, clap, clap for clap, 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 clap to the rhythm. Find the rhythm and clap to it. Now make your own rhythm. Now invent a poem. It's like, how do we get children excited? No one has asked that question, because I think our schools are smug because they know that there will always be more people applying to the school than there will be seats inside the school. And therefore, you don't have to make education an exciting experience. And the parents are also the kind of people who just want to know, is my child going to get 98%? Is he going to get into a good college? It's not about, at the end of that class, did my child really learn to love Sanskrit? I don't think that's in any parent's head. So as long as we don't have an attitude that says, I love my native language, I love my mother tongue, I love language in general, we are not going to actually change very much. So publishing and mother tongue twisters and all, lovely. I'm glad you're doing it. I think you should do more of it. I'm happy that you're doing it. But somewhere along the line, our national psyche has to be rejigged to say, boss, science rests on imagination. You do not have a submarine until someone writes a book about a submarine. You cannot fly until someone imagines flight. You cannot think of, of making something new unless you invent that inside your brain. And therefore, the imagination, inventiveness, the capacity to think, the capacity to dream, to imagine, to think about magic, about invented. Okay, the child who invents a dream world is thinking about a world of tomorrow. That world, that improved and more beautiful world, won't come into existence if the child is not allowed time to dream. Give your children time to dream. To just sit together and listen, that's okay. They don't have to be learning soccer and ballet and Trachtenberg mathematics and Vedic mathematics and going to 300 classes. Let them dream, and then maybe things will be different.
I completely agree. Thank you so much, Jerry, for putting those thoughts out like that. And I hope the right people are listening, and I hope that this will sort of permeate across different spheres. I'm going to move on to questions now. There are some questions on the chat here and on Facebook as well. So can I invite Vidula to ask her question? That's the first question that we've got. Vidula, feel free to switch on your video and audio and ask.
Hi, Vidula.
Yeah, hi. So my question was regarding poem and can it be translated? And if it can, how should one approach the translation? Because I've read some really horrible translations where I could not really connect to it.
Okay, I want to say that also you've probably read some magnificent translations of poetry, like Where the Mind is Without Fear and the Head is Held High and Knowledge is Free. That wasn't written originally in English. It was written in Bangla and then translated into English. Okay. So some poems that are now practically anthems with us were actually written in other languages, like Neruda, for instance. I want to do to you what spring does to the cherry trees. Everyone thinks this is an English line, but it's actually a Spanish line. So yes, it can be done, but no, it is often not successful. It's the most challenging thing that you can do, trying to translate a poem. And therefore, that is climbing Mount Everest. That is the biggest challenge for the translator, to do successful poetry translation. But it is also going to, okay, here's the thing, right? Before you actually climb Mount Everest, when you say, I climb Mount Everest and here is the picture, okay? You may have made 10 attempts that are failures. You won't ever post those on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever. So I think sometimes perhaps we need to bury our failures, and we don't bury our failures often enough. So for most translators, once they've finished translating, if someone will publish it, that's all right. For me, I try to wait and read the thing again and see if it works in English now. I must not say to myself, this is Marathi, this is Hindi, this is Portuguese, this is Spanish. I have only got to see if it works in English, because that is what most readers who are reading in English will have access to. Yes, you'll have people who will come and say, oh, but I read the Marathi and it isn't as good as the Marathi. If you can read in the original language, please don't read a translation. Please read in the original language. But if you can't read in the original language, there's a translation for it. Yeah. So poetry, if you can read it in the original language, please do. If you can't and you find a translation bad, move on. Find a translation that's good, of a poem that's good. That's all I can say. Yeah, Vidula?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. Dr. Saba Bashir has a comment. Can I invite you, Dr. Bashir, to say your comment here?
Hi. It's not a
Hi,
question.
Saba Bashir. Hi.
It's not a question. It's a very interesting talk.
Thank you. Your audio's gone. Back.
I said you kind of complicated it more for the translator, because I've always felt that words had a kind of a smell to it and a sound to it, and you were talking about form also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of it further complicates the issue, and how you are negotiating, as you were saying, between words. So I mean, and that's what I'm saying. It's not a question. It's just I'm trying to think more about it and how do we deal with it.
When I'm with Saif Mahmood, who was here last week, we are doing Urdu together.
Yeah. And you're doing Majaz.
Majaz, yeah. And when you take anything from Nastaliq and put it into Romi script, you're looking at it and thinking, "Arey, kya hai? What can this do with Pissa, with a slash of the and just that whole thing, that Pissa explodes out of the word. The whole dastan is there inside that word, and you're writing story. I shouldn't do this at all. But I think about how I encountered Agha Shahid Ali's fairs and how rich that was. And all I can do is add my chota sa salt to this mountain. So I'm going to do that. We'll try. We'll see. Koshish karte hain. Okay? Maximum nakam, maximum failure. And what is there in that failure? Hopefully that failure will be the seed of someone who gets so angry and says, Majaz, you did this to Majaz. I'm going to do better. And does better. And does better. So even a failure in translation can have some meaning, can have some value. Yeah? But you have to take failures in the right spirit. You have to be able to look at it and say, wow, he did better than I did. Thank you. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Thank you, Sabha. Yeah.
I'm going to move on to the next question. Is from Stuti. Stuti, are you here to ask your question on video?
Hi, Stuti.
I don't know if Stuti is here. Otherwise, I can read out her question.
Sorry, no audio, says Stuti, looking with a emoji that says.
Okay, so I'll read out her question. It says, "Hi Jerry, thank you for your visceral talk. I read M and the Big Home some 4 years ago and still cannot get over its brilliance. There are evidences of many languages in it, but the oral is also a language. So did you think of it as a project of oral or sonic translation?"
Oh, I think that's a lovely question, Stuti. And thank you for what you said about M and the Big Home. When you're actually working when you're writing yourself and that translation is happening, you begin to realize how difficult everything is in the act of creation. Because if you're writing a simple conversation between two people, you're becoming a man and a woman, man and a woman, man and a woman. You're switching not because men and women speak differently. I don't believe there is an ability. Some people say, oh, I can tell when it's a woman writing, oh, I can tell when it's a man writing. I just think give over, do. Why would you want to go there? But when you are actually writing a book, you become sort of aware that there is texture, sound textures to the way women use language, and there is sound textures to the way men use language. So if you actually wrote a conversation between two men, it would be grunts largely, because men often, when they speak, they often use a lot more than just words. So it'll be like, if you've had really something bad happen to you, your best friend will walk into the room and give you a hug, okay, and then slap your back 3 or 4 hard, like really hard. And what he's saying is, yeah, I know this is really terrible, and I feel terrible for you. I don't know how to say it, but you're tough and you'll get through this. And you're so tough that even at this moment, I can hit you hard. Okay. All this is contained in that. And without knowing it, you are also receiving this, accepting it, being warmed by the compliment, being warmed by the physical contact, being warmed by the expression of emotion. And that is the magic of being human, in a way, that so many things are not oral. So many things are about the moment and its richness. That's why I keep saying writing is failure, because we're cutting everything out. And you say she hugged him, and you're not saying in that moment of the hug he smelled cuticura powder, and the cuticura powder reminded him of his grandmother, and he also felt the warmth of her body, and he kept thinking, but this is a hug, it's not about body. It's like so many things happen inside the head. And I often think that the only way to get it is to suggest, and to pray that you as the reader comes in with your bouquet of being human and fills in my gaps. And Stuti, if you liked them in the Big Home, it's because you filled in those gaps. You were the kind of reader who brought memory and imagination and empathy and sound and feeling, and you filled it in. So thank you for that act of reading.
That's beautiful. Thanks a lot, Jerry. The next question is from Ratan Veer. Can I invite you to ask your question, Ratan?
Hello.
Hi, Ratan, you're the one who suddenly turned up. Hi, Ratan.
Yeah. Actually, I listened many translators, but they complained about invisibility and all these things. But your spirit and your passion, it is really very. All translators, including me, should have that kind of spirit. And my observation is that that any kind of translation or even bad translation is better than no translation. And the second thing is, when we thinking about the gain of the translation, we can say no translation is the last translation. As you have said, I'm taking lead from you that every translation need another translation, and original is also intertextual. So why, when a translator uh, do we say good and bad, that is, I think, not a question at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ratanvi. That was a wonderful thing to say. I think that idea of invisibility, that's written into the. If you have a problem with that, you shouldn't do it. Mainly because I love what Shanta Gokhale said. She gave a talk at Elphinstone College, my old college, where she talked about the goddess in my puja room. And she's not a believer or anything, but what she meant was, as soon as you enter into the act of translation, you enter an imaginary puja room in your head. In the act of writing, you are the god in your puja room because you are inventing the universe for yourself, right? You are inventing that book verse for yourself. But when you enter the translation thing, the person in front of you is the writer of the original. Now you have to do your seva for that murti, that image of the original writer. You cannot be the pandit in the puja room and want to be the god as well. That's not your job. Right now, it's not your job. So you have to it's like complaining about, it's okay. I'm not going to even try an analogy. I'm just saying that that's part of it. What I liked about your comment was wonderful. It obviously came from a place of close connection with translation. So yes, I think one of the terrible things that happens in India is that if a book is translated, then, it's done. It's not done. Its journey has begun. And the journey will have many stages. And there may be someone who comes along and says, I can't believe that was how he or she translated it. I'm going to do a better job. There must be space made for these things. Publishers, I hope, will get there one day, and readers will get there one day. I would, like for instance, on my shelves, I have Yevtushenko translated by 3 or 4 different people. And I love reading variants of these poems and seeing how they all get dealt with the same thing. I have a collection, I think, of called 3 essays or something, where there are 3 translations of the same short story. Again, a very exciting moment. And, it's a great afternoon when you spend reading the same story with 3 different rhythms. 3 different people have interpreted this. And it's only eventually translation is one act of interpretation. And there must be many. And there must be several, because all language rests on polyphony. We must have many sounds in the room, or it becomes monolingual. And life is not as exciting. Thank you, Ratanvi.
You've given us so many wonderful metaphors and images of translators and translation. I'm still sort of processing them. Our next question is from Pragya Lal. Pragya, can I invite you to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Jerry. Hi. Thank you, Mohini, for making this happen. I have to say that Cobalt Blue was the first book that I've read during the lockdown. And it left me, like, I don't know if if someone has brought this to your notice, but I feel that you really rule the genre of dard. I don't know, if you have, if you felt that, but I love how all of your books, deal with so much pain, but also leave you feeling a sense of optimism. So I really, really enjoy that. But I'll get to my question. I recently caught you at the Bangalore Literature Festival, and
I hope I was polite.
You were lovely.
Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah.
And you said that listening was an act of love. So I think, I was wondering if how that translates when you're working as a writer translator. How do you balance the act of both listening and speaking? Because writers want to leave the sense of their namak wherever they everywhere they go. So as a translator, how do you withhold?
Yeah. See, I think one of the things that I think makes it easier is that when you think about your own namak, you can go and write. I can go and write what I'm writing. Okay. For me, listening as an act of love is the fact that I will stumble upon a book that I want to translate only after having read 10 books that I don't want to translate. But I will read those 10 books to find that 11th book. So for me, that is an act of love towards the language. It's like you're saying, it's not as if you can, every book that you buy is, I try. The good thing is thankfully that Marathi, Hindi books are not expensive. Okay. So you can afford to say, okay, chalo, $200, I'll take a chance. And you buy 5 or 6 books and you bring them home. You're reading them and, often you're just thinking, yeah, okay, nice, but not my book. Not the one that, and books ambush you, actually, like after I started translating and I did a couple, I thought, okay, now, Jerry, it is time you should just get on with your own work. You have to write now. And, in between you'll be reading something and suddenly what happens is that the line starts goonging. See, again, Hindi, goonj. Goonj is the perfect word for that thing that happens inside your head because it has that, that sound of something wandering inside your head. And that line won't rest until it has been made into English. And then you're hooked again. And you've got to do this as a translation. And you start work. And there's that, the first bits of the translation are just joyous because they're just happening and wonderful and whatnot. And then suddenly it begins to become like really work. And you're actually confronting the fact that it's like 240 pages. And then things start to happen in a different way. But I'm saying that the first moment is an ambush. It's an ambush of love because a line or a phrase or something will jump out at you and trap you and catch you. And it is only when you're listening to language that happens. Does that make sense at all, Pragya?
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, goonj is a lovely way to describe translation as well.
No, yeah, lovely. Yeah.
The next question is from Rucha. Rucha, can I invite you to switch on video and audio and ask your question?
Yeah, hi, am I audible?
Hi. Yeah, audible perfectly. Go on, Rucha.
Hi, sorry, I won't be able to switch on my video, but
that's okay, don't worry.
Yeah, so hi Jerry. So I had two questions and I'm going to add a little to the first question. My question is, how do you go beyond translating a language and actually attempt to translate a culture? And to this I'll add, how do you do that without appropriating somebody's culture? If you come from a different sort of cultural or socio-economic position. And the second is, do you imagine a certain reader, audience, or in your, I'll borrow a word from you, soul, when you're translating? Like, are you imagining somebody? Are you writing for somebody when you're translating?
Sure. Okay. The first one, how do you avoid appropriation? I think you approach with as much respect as possible. Okay. And often this is, okay, let's take Baluta. Okay. When I started doing Baluta, I was very aware that I am a Roman Catholic boy of Goan descent. I'm privileged in the sense that I'm middle class and I have some money in the bank and I have access to English and I have access to, I'm middle class. I'm part of the top 5% in the world because I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from largely. Baluta is written from the position of a man who was a Dalit and who was also inventing the genre of autobiography for himself and for his community. He had no idea whether it would work. He had no idea whether it would, whether anybody was willing to listen. He had no idea whether it would be published. He had no idea whether people would say to him, "You are mocking your community by presenting them like that. Why are you doing this to your own community, talking about them in this manner?" Okay, but he wrote it. It's an act of huge courage and bravery. I can only try and be as respectful as possible. Okay, that's the only thing I can do. Beyond that, one day, I pray that we will get beyond identity politics. Okay, because for me, every time I have done, this is the honorable exception, I must say. And thank you all. Most times when I have, confronted an audience with a new translation, the first question I am asked is, do you know enough Marathi to do this? And I think I am asked this question because my name is not Jaitirtha Gokhale. It is not a Hindu Brahmin sounding name, which would entitle me to translating Marathi. It is a clearly caste free name. It is a name from a minority community, and therefore that question can be asked with liberty. My first response, the first time I heard that question, was deep anger and hurt, which I did not express, of course, because it was not the moment. It was a moment of celebration. It was a moment of my first translation, and you don't want to hurt an audience. And the woman who was asking it was a friend, an old friend. So she was not coming from a place of trying to hurt me. She was just surprised that I should know Marathi, that someone like you should know Marathi and translate this. And all I could say was, what do you think I did? I thought I took this and shoved it into Google Translate and it came out on the other side. No, I did it. Now read it and see if I know enough Marathi. So I did one, I said what I thought and what I felt, that Marathi and now Hindi, which my first translation from Hindi will come out in a few months, the lockdown permitting. Marathi and Hindi are places of pilgrimage for me. English is my language of dream and nightmare. English is personal and intimate. English is home. But Marathi, Hindi, and my other languages are places where I go to get succor, where I go to get rejuvenation, where I go to get riches, which I bring home to English. And in every act of translation, I set out with the humility of a pilgrim, with the expectation of a pilgrim. And that is as much respect as I can offer. Tomorrow, it may come to the point at which only women will translate women, because some people may say a man translating a woman is appropriating a woman's voice and is appropriating a woman's identity and whatnot. I don't think I did it that way. If at any point my translations of women or of Dalits or of people who have mental issues has reeked of appropriation, I am deeply, deeply sorry. I can only say that. I never intended it that way. Yeah. And as for, the second part of your question, which was...
Sorry. Can I?
Yeah, of course.
No, Jerry, actually, I thought that your translation of Baburao Bagul was so on point. And after reading your translation, I went back and read the original, trying to read it as best as I could in Marathi. And this is a question more for myself, because I'm translating a piece by somebody else. This is not, I did not intend to say that you've appropriated.
No. Don't worry about it. I'm just saying, I understand completely where you're coming from. Rucha, there is at this point no hurt or no anger. I'm not feeling hurt or angry about what you said. Don't worry about it. But I think sometimes, there are these questions that come up also, and we must address them. And if we cannot address them in a forum like this, then we can never address them. No? So that's fine. Don't worry about it. Now, the second part of your question, do you imagine a reader? Of course, there is an imagined reader. But you know what that imagined reader is yourself. You expect everyone to read the way you read. You expect everyone to behave the way you behave. And often I behave badly also, I have to say. Okay, so I'm often the kind of reader who says, description. I'm not particularly keen on description. Aja green, move quickly past. Then I have to say, no, stop. So actually, when you're translating, you become the world's best reader, because you cannot jump a word. You cannot jump a conversation that you think you know, which you often do in other books. You're reading with a deep, serious attention of I don't know, someone who is watching by the bedside of a loved one who is in a coma for a trace of life. You're watching intently for a sign, something like that. So the attention is fully focused in the moment of the translator reading, which no other reader does. So I imagine a translator reading my translation because I want the best possible reader for any work that I do. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, thank you,
Yes,
Roja.
yes,
Both were
thank you
very
so much.
interesting questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Articulating such so many difficult issues as well and so beautifully. We have we're nearing 8 o'clock and we do have a few questions. So Jerry, do you have a few minutes? Maybe we can.
Yeah. We can run on for a bit. Yeah.
There are about 5 or 6 questions. Let's see. I'm sorry if some.
Yeah.
We'll try to do them. Akanksha, you have a question. Can I invite you to ask your question on video?
Hi Mohini, hi Jerry. Thank you for
Hi,
the
Akanksha.
question.
Yeah.
So Jerry, I just want to, my question is as a reader, but before I go there, I just want to let you know that you have been a very, very big part of 2020 for me. I heard your talk and interacted with you, got my book signed at HLF, Hyderabad Literary Festival this year. And I couldn't find a copy of M in the Big Home there because the stock had run out. But in the next 2 days, I did find it, but I couldn't find you to sign it. So anyhow, I just felt like, okay, something adhura reh gaya, it will get completed some other time. And also recently, I read Cobalt Blue, which was, again, I got it signed from you and it was amazing. And I have probably spent the entire month of March suggesting people to read Cobalt Blue. And
Great.
M and the Big Home was for January and February.
Okay.
So my question is, because this is something I faced after reading and interacting with my friends who read Cobalt Blue, is that as a reader, it kind of gets lonely when people, get stuck at the idea that, oh, it's a translated book, so much has been lost, it's a beautiful story, but Marathi mein bahut acha hota, and I get stuck at acha hota, but we don't know Marathi, and this is what we get. So the conversation gets so stuck at the loss that I am unable to talk about the story and what the translation has beautifully done. So, and I also get it that it took me years to reach this place, to have this point of view for translations as well, but it kind of gets lonelier with every passing translated book that I read, and I don't know how to keep myself motivated as a reader. Like, I love them, but I also want to talk about them. How do I do that? Yeah.
See, I think, there is a moment in one's life when one is a proselytizer for the kind of books one reads. One keeps on telling other people, you should read this book. And I would actually take a copy and give it to somebody and say, you should read this book. And, not for birthday presents or anything, but just like, read this book, read this book, read this book. And then, I noticed that my office colleagues, for instance, I'd give them the book and they say, okay, yeah, sure. And then it would be 6 months on their table. And after 6 months, I just pick up the book and take it back and wait for them to squeak and complain, and they'd not even notice it was gone. So eventually what happens is you begin, if you're the average kind of person, you just run out of that energy and you stop doing that, right? Yeah. Translators are the people who don't run out of that energy. We are still proselytizers. We still want people to read this book. Because when you're reading the book, also that goonj that happens in your head, it's an echo that isn't in a chamber. It's an echo that's in, like, it's coming out of a tower. And you want your tower to be on a hill. And you want everyone to read this book because, my God, it's so beautiful. Just listen to it. Just listen to it.
Exactly.
And yeah, if you could read it in the original, of course you should read it in the original, but most of us can't. And we have 30, 40 living literatures around us. You're never going to be, and okay, let's also get this clear, right? I could read, for instance, in at least 10 other languages because all those languages share the Devanagari script, right? But if I read in those languages, I am going to be reading a translation. Because even as I read, say, Rajasthani, say, which if it is written in Hindi, in Devanagari, I am reading it slowly and thinking, what does this word mean? What does that word mean? Looking up a dictionary, coming back, saying, okay. It is as good as reading a translation. So we are always in that position in this country, and yet we have this riches of literature around us, and so we want to access that. We do it through translation. Some people don't want to. That's also all right. You get used to it being all right. You get used to loving your friends for their reluctances, for their failures, because often we fail our friends as well. We don't share their enthusiasm. Someone will ring you up and say, have you seen this new series on Netflix? You have to see it. and you think, yeah, I know, I saw that series on Netflix, and I mean, I saw it, but I don't know that I'm really that interested in drug dealers. So you don't share their enthusiasms also, no? So you have to learn to forgive the fact that they don't share yours.
Yeah, but
Good
the
luck,
search
Akash.
keeps on going that someday there will be someone
Yeah,
who
there
will
will be,
enjoy this because
there will
you
be,
know how to give that up.
there will be. Don't give that up. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Akanksha. In the interest of time, I'm going to move quickly to the next question by Sayoni. Can I ask you to keep your question as brief as possible since it's already 8, but please do ask your question.
Yeah.
Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're perfectly audible. Go ahead, Shayani.
Okay. Hi, sir. So I think you almost answered all of the questions about the whole appropriating and all of that stuff. I wanted to ask you that since you're born, you're made to speak a certain language, and you end up thinking in that language. And how do you escape the whole thinking when you're trying to translate? Like, what is the process for you when you try to translate?
I don't even try to escape, because trying to escape anything that you are is tantamount to a moment of hypocrisy. Okay, like saying to yourself, like for instance, saying to yourself, okay, this book is about murder, right? I need to be a murderer? No, I need to be a translator at this point in time, and myself fractured, broken, veined with my own inabilities, hypocrisies, and strengths is what I am bringing to the table. Everybody who reads my book should know that a human being did this. They are human beings with their biographies, their geographies, their histories, their logics, their languages, everything. They will bring that to the reader's table, to the reader's side of the table. I'm not asking any of them to deny their selfhood. Don't ask me to deny mine. I will bring mine to the table. Understand that I have brought mine. And if you have a problem with mine, the world is vast and large, and bookshelves are loaded with other books. Go find your book. Go find your book, is what I say. But don't ever ask a writer to be who he is not. Don't ask a translator to be who he is not.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sure, go on.
So when you read in different languages, like you said, you've translated from Marathi to English and then from Hindi to English. How do you change when you read different languages?
I read aloud in Hindi and Marathi, and when I'm reading almost all sacred work, which is work of writing or translation, one of the important things that I do is to read aloud, because to read aloud is then to hear, to bring several other parts of the brain into intimate contact with the text. Okay, because then the tongue and the drying of the throat, or the loosening of the throat, or the diaphragm, or the muscles of the stomach, everything gets into action. Okay, so when you're reading aloud Hindi, I try to sound like a Hindi speaker. I fail because I am a Roman Catholic born, and most Hindi speakers who hear me speaking Hindi will have a gentle chuckle. Okay, no problems with that. That's who they are. I'm saying the only change I can bring to the self is the intensity of my contact with the text. That's the change. Because often when you are just reading, if I'm just reading a book because I'm reading it and I'm enjoying it now, not enjoying it, I'm just reading it, I read in a certain way, which sometimes is about even just passing time. Okay, that's as simple as that. We often read to pass time. I often have been stuck in other people's houses with books that they have chosen, and I've started reading them. Would not have read that, but I'm reading it now, and that's the enjoyment of that moment. So the only change is in the intensity of the experience of the text. Thank you, Shayani.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shayani. There's a comment from Vandana Singh, and she says that
Hi, Vandana.
Hi.
Would you like to begin with your comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Hello, Jerry. Hello, everyone else.
Hi, Vandana.
I'm a literary translator myself,
Hey, good to hear you.
and I just wanted to add to what you said, and you said everything so beautifully. But what you said initially about lost in translation, and to that, I feel that people who say that are obviously those who know the original language. And therein lies the irony of the entire comment, because my reaction to that always is that if you know the original language and if you know what has been lost, then why don't you just read it in the original language?
Yeah.
So that is.
So you are a frank speaking lady, and I've often thought of saying that. Actually, I've often thought of saying, "Arey, chup
Yeah,
rahe,"
I mean,
you
you
know.
say that, okay, so why are you reading a translation? If you know what's lost, read the original.
Yeah, totally. Always read the original if you can. And if you can't read the original, be humble with it in front of the translation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but you
I
can't tell readers that.
one needs to just keep driving the point home that the translation is not for those who know both the languages. The translation is for those who do not know the original language.
Yeah.
That's point number one. And very briefly, I just want to add, I mean, one little um, maybe advice for those who might be wanting to take up translation is that, and what I feel about it, that I do not think a translation can um, really come out as a good translation unless you love the act of translation. I feel that is a very, very basic thing to a translation. If you do not love translation, it will not come out right.
I
So
think that's a wonderfully well said thing. I
yeah,
think actually, whether you're cooking or you're bringing up a child
yeah,
or you're doing any of the wonderful creative things that can be done, you're writing music, if it doesn't come, isn't an act of love, it probably isn't going to be very nice.
absolutely. And I think in all the creative and literary activities that we might think of, translation is one that is purely a labor of love, and
Totally.
nothing less than that, and maybe everything more than that.
Yeah.
So that was just my brief comment. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
so
for
much.
this.
Thank you, Vandana.
Thanks a lot, Vandana, for those comments. I think all of us can agree with you there. There's a question from S. Mukundan. Can I invite you to ask your question?
Hi, Jerry, can you hear me?
Hi, Mukundan. Yes, I can hear. Hey, hi, Mukundan. There you are. Yeah. I love this stuff. I'm looking into people's houses and seeing pictures in the background and whatnot. It's lovely. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this wasn't a question,
Is that your
more
mom
of an
and dad on the
impression I
wall?
had. I'm sorry.
Up there? Is that your mom and dad on the wall?
No, that's my grandfather, and then that's my dad.
See, they're all like, and you're the translation. You've crossed all those languages of DNA, and that's you. A, C, G, T, all mixed up, and that's what happened there. Everything is translation. Okay, Mukundan, go ask your question.
Yeah. So this was more of an impression that I had when I read a couple of translated works in English from Tamil. So I saw a usage of a couple of terms and contractions that don't really sit well with the literary atmosphere that's being generated in the text, right? I know for a fact that people don't say words like folk or folks, or in dialogues, people don't say certain contractions. So how would you approach it as a translator, and just your thoughts on that?
Okay. You know, where the really difficult stuff happens is when you're reading a book in which someone is using non-standard Marathi or non-standard Hindi. Okay, so okay, in Vandana Mishra's book, that is, though her name sounds North Indian, she's actually Maharashtrian, Goan Maharashtrian, Konkan. She says something like there is a moment where a Pathan is talking to a woman, okay, and he uses Hindi badly, okay. Now, when I translated it, I used English badly. And every single one of the critics said, why is he doing that? And you say, okay, because I was trying something, okay, and I failed. I'm sorry. Maaf karna bhai. I won't do it again. Sorry. I pulled my ears. Okay. Okay. Now, having said that, yes, we make missteps. Now, I don't know if it's a misstep for Mukundan because he knows Tamil and is reading English when he should be reading Tamil. But if it is a misstep for him, Mukundan needs to start translating. Mukundan needs to show those guys how it is done.
No, I speak
I'm
Tamil, but I don't really
serious.
read
I'm
Tamil.
serious. I think, have you thought of translating? Start small.
No, I
Start
don't know
really
Tamil well
small.
enough to
Start
start
with a small
translating.
essay. Start with an essay
Mm.
that you really like. Start with a letter. Start with something and see how it works for you. Okay? Because that'll make you a lot more sympathetic with people who say folk and folks and whatnot. Because perhaps there's a word in now I don't know any Tamil. I can say venda ve venda and I can say kavala parade. I can say things like that. Okay, like really simple things. The cherry, seri. But I don't know Tamil at all, and I'm told it's like really a challenging language because there is old Tamil, which is not, that doesn't link up to the rest of everything, which is
The way you
Sanskrit.
speak.
And then there is a Sanskrit overlay in modern Tamil, etc., etc., etc. So it must be quite nightmarish. But I mean, to think of translating Tamil into English. But I think those people who did that often did it as a solution to what they saw as a problem. Now, solutions, by their very definition, are not miracles. They're just solutions. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. Forgive them. Enjoy the rest of the book. Any other questions, Mukunda?
Oh, no, that's it. Thank you so
come
much.
on. I mean, but I'm serious about translating. We need lots of translators and young people who feel so strongly about language and who respond so strongly about language, who can pick out something like folks or contractions which are not used, are non-standard, already show signs of becoming translators.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mukundan.
Thank you.
So we're almost at 8:15 now. I think we should sort of wrap up after a last question, maybe.
Yeah, because I need to eat dinner.
Yes, and sorry for making you stay on for longer.
No.
You had a question. Can I invite you to ask your question? I'm sorry, there are questions on Facebook as well, but we just don't have time to get to them. I wish we did. There are some excellent questions coming in. But let's just end with this last one here. Anirudh, can I invite you to ask your question?
Are you very hungry?
Hi, Jerry.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, Anirudh. Hi, Anirudh.
Yeah. Thanks for your thoughts and translation. Those were really helpful. My question is about the sounds in the language. My question is that since each language has its own unique sounds, how do you really translate them? And if we appropriate these sounds to the target language, then how do we make sure that we give justice to the source language? Because I find this, when I try to translate, I always find this question that when I translate it, it doesn't sound the same, so it is also, I mean, even the culture is quite related to it, I feel, because when I translate, I feel that it is very culturally alienated. So, what's your thoughts on it? How do we make sure that we give justice when we translate the sounds of the languages? I mean, something that I had.
Okay, Anirudh, may I say something frank?
Sure.
Okay. Don't think of cultures as hermetically sealed. Okay, so you translate from what? From Malayalam, Tamil?
Kannada.
Kannada. Yeah. Now, is Kannada particularly is a very exciting and interesting literary culture. For me, a moment of great truth came when someone in Kerala asked, there was a poll asking who is your favorite Malayalam author. Okay, and guess who the answer was? Guess? Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Okay.
Now, is that an invalid answer? They read him in Malayalam, they internalize him in Malayalam, and they love him in Malayalam. Now, is he part of their culture or not?
Definitely is.
If he is allowed to be part of their culture, why is a poem in Kannada alienated in English? Are you sure that poet has not read loads of English poetry, which is rattling about in his head as well?
Right.
Okay. Many, like for instance, take Swadesh Deepak, whom I'm translating shortly. Okay, Swadesh Deepak is an interesting case. He's written an awesome play called Court Martial in Hindi. And he then wrote a autobiography called Maine Mandu Nahi Dekha, which is I have not seen Mandu, which I have translated. Okay, look at the language scape of the man. Huh? He is a Punjabi-born Punjabi speaker. He writes in Hindi and is conversant with Urdu. Okay, and teaches English in a university. Okay, right? His autobiography, I have not seen Mandu, is about his nervous breakdown, his incarceration in a mental hospital, and his recovery from there. Throughout that period, the sign of his mental breakdown is he speaks English. I am translating this book into English. I am taking it from Hindi and taking it into the language of his insanity. Challenge. Lovely, juicy challenge. Do you walk away from that or do you just embrace that challenge? Yeah. So Nagraj, Anirudh, it doesn't matter. You cannot do justice to the poem in its original with its music and its magic and its cultural moorings and the way people use it and the way people think of it. It doesn't matter. Do such translation as best you can. As best you can. Throw everything you've got of Kannada and of English and of that intersection set which represents you into that act of translation, and the gods will be forgiving. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks.
And best of luck. If you're doing poetry translation, my God, you have put that boat of salt into the river of meaning, and it is ripping your boat away from you. But what fun it is. Huh?
Yeah, my question was specific to poetry, actually.
Yeah, it is impossible. I've done, I've done, a set of poetry translations with Neela Bhagwat, which will come out soon, called The Ant Who Swallowed the Sun. They are from the Varkari tradition, the same poet tradition, from the 13th century to the 19th century. It was such joy. It was such nightmare. Such nightmare. Like I would get up in the middle of the night thinking, not working. That can't be the way I want it. I want it to work. Okay. And then I'd have to calm myself down and go back to sleep. And still till today, like when the book has gone to press, I get up and I think Kanhopatra, that name just doesn't work with stressed, unstressed in English. But that's her name. That's her name. It has to work. But hey, if we could have it all our way, what would be the fun? Yeah. So welcome. It's just going to be a lovely ride. Don't be in a hurry. Okay. It took me 7 or 8 years to get 50, 60 poems done. 7 or 8 years of like working with them, living with them, thinking about them, rethinking them, thinking this word is perfect only to be told that by Neela that it doesn't work. It's just like, but so exciting. So exciting.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerry. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Anirudh, for that question. Jerry, I think we won't sort of keep you further because it's already 8:20. There are some excellent questions from Hiran, Tara, Tejasvi. But I think we will sadly have to wrap up.
Okay.
But thank you for so patiently and passionately answering all the questions. It was amazing to hear the engagement that people have with translation. And I'm so glad that people came up with questions. And clearly it's come out of an actual engagement with translated works, which is always really wonderful to see. So thank you, Jerry, for spending your time.
No problem. I just am saying, Mohini, if they have questions and they haven't been answered, I'd feel very bad if they just were left hanging in the bardo state, as it were. So if you could copy them out onto emails and send them to me and with their email, they can send you the email to assignments.for.jerry@gmail.com, or if you're listening, you can send it in. I'll be happy to answer them personally. And, because it's not, there it is, mothertonguetwisters@gmail.com. Yeah, so email them to that and, I'll try and answer them. I can't promise that I'll answer them at length. I can't promise I'll answer them swiftly, but within the next week or the next 10 days, I'll try and get all those answers back. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
And please go out and buy some translations. Bye, Anirudh. Bye, Vandana. Bye, Mukundan. Bye, Vandan, everyone. Oh, Saurabh S says you're awesome, Jerry Pinto. Thank you. That's nice.
I
Nice.
really enjoyed the session and has a lot of things to think about. Thank you. I'll pass on the questions to you over email and we'll hopefully get to answering them. Thank you so much. There were so many of you listening in live. There were almost 100 people live at one point. So I'm really glad. This video is also going to be available on our Facebook page. So I'll share the link with everyone. You can share it with others as well. We're Mother Tongue Twist on Facebook. So please feel free to follow us. There'll be, exciting sessions every week, every Thursday, 7 p.m. same time. So I hope you'll be here. We have an amazing translator next week as well, Rita Kothari. Jerry, do join us if
Rita Kothari, old friend, Gujarati translator. Very nice. Some really nice work. Okay. That'll be great. Okay.
Again, thank you everyone for being here. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I really enjoyed listening to Jerry, and thank you, Jerry, for spending time with us.
Okay. Now, somewhere here there is one button that says bye-bye.
Yes.
Afi. Oof, sorry.